when it comes to preventative maintenance, there's not a lot on a container, but there's a couple moving parts. So if you look at those latches, if they feel sticky or they're making squeaking or whatever, really a lot of times all it needs is a simple drop of your sterilizable lubricant. Just work that in there and they'll be working good again. A lot of times it doesn't need to be sent out to get fixed or anything like that. That's all it is. Sometimes it does. Sometimes they're bent. Sometimes they've been worn out. Containers can be fixed just like any other instrument. So that's another thing too, right? Is the cost to fix is usually always lower than the cost to replace.
What if one conversation could save a life? What if one new process or new product could save a patient from surgical harm? Broadcasting from a hospital basement near you, you're listening to the Beyond Clean Canada podcast, the voice of medical device reprocessing from C to C to C. Each week, we spotlight the people, processes, and products from around the country and the world that are disrupting our profession and helping you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Join us as we have the kinds of conversations that matter and give our industry the kind of voice that it deserves. And now it's time to go True North strong and beyond clean.
Welcome back, all you clean freaks. It is season 2 of Canada's Beyond Clean podcast. So kicking off today with our very first guest, Derek from Trudell. We will be starting off with a series of questions for him that will hinder all of our curiosity when it comes to rigid containers. But first, a word from our sponsors.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean Canada, the voice of sterile processing from C to C to C.
Welcome, Canadian Clean Freaks, to Season 2 of the Beyond Clean Canada podcast. Stacey and Barry here, and on today's episode, we have Derek McLennan of Trudell Healthcare. Derek, can you share a little bit about yourself with us and the audience?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, no. First, thanks for having me on an episode of the Beyond Clean podcast here. Definitely looking forward to it. Excited to be on here. It's something that the Canadian audience has needed for a long time now. So definitely excited. I'm Derek McLennan. I'm the Manitoba, Saskatchewan Territory Manager, Trudell Healthcare Solutions. That's my current role. I live in Winnipeg and get to cover both these beautiful prairie provinces in the middle of Canada. My background is in athletic therapy, orthopedic technology, research, and then I made the transition over into Trudell and into medical sales and those sorts of things about 3 years ago. Really saw it as an opportunity to take my patient care experience and kind of be able to really expand and be able to affect a lot more patients through this role. I also love connecting with people and working to solve problems. And I think that's really a large portion of what this role is. So that's a little bit about me. I'm not sure if there's anything else you had questions about.
That's awesome. Actually, I think we'll be in this episode will air after, but I'll be in your territory
nice.
In June for IPAC.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Although, like I said, this will air after, but I will be in there. Actually, a fun fact about Trudell, because I do a little research before I have everybody on. But in 1922, George Stuart Trudell established GS Trudell Imports here in London, Ontario. And actually, along with medical devices, he also imported religious devices. So it'd be interesting to dive a little deeper into what exactly those religious devices were. But other than that, yeah, Trudell's a great company. They're always available when needed. And they're great. And how long have you worked for Trudell, Derek?
So I've been at Trudell for right at almost 3 years now. Started in April of 2022 with Trudell and been with them for just almost the 3 years now. So it's been a great experience. It's great to hear that you've had a great experience with Trudell as well. I definitely and grateful that they gave me the opportunity to enter this role, not having any experience or background with it. It's been, a huge learning curve. Learned a lot and got to meet a lot of great people in this role, and, hopefully helped out a lot of people as well. So that's, it's great to hear your experience with us as well.
Have you always been in the medical field, Derek, or is this your first role with the medical area? Always been in the medical area?
No, yeah, always been in medical. So as I kind of mentioned, backgrounds, athletic therapy, kinesiology. So graduated from the University of Manitoba here locally, went on to work with a couple of our sports teams here in Winnipeg as the head athletic therapist for a handful of years. So worked with the Valor Football Club for 2 seasons just before COVID. And then prior to that, I was with the Winnipeg Goldeyes Baseball Club for 3 seasons as their athletic therapist. From there, I made the transition into orthopedic technology at the hospitals. So kind of working as like a casting technician at one of our big hospitals here in Winnipeg, the Health Science Center.
You're keeping busy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, very. Yeah.
Yeah. Derek, according to the Medical Device Active License Listing, the MDAL, that is found on the Government of Canada website, it gives descriptions on Class 1 to Class 3 of medical device offered for sale in Canada. Can you explain where Genesis Pan for sterilization is categorized within the Government of Canada's MDAL?
Yeah, no, great question. So in Canada, we're unique in the fact that rigid sterilization containers, Health Canada doesn't actually include them as a medical device. So they're not a licensed medical device in Canada. Saying that in other jurisdictions, they are included in medical device licensing, so they do require licensing. So in Canada, with them not being licensed, they still need to abide by other regulations that are out there for medical device reprocessing. So you're looking at like your CSA standards, your ISO standards, things like that. But they don't require a medical device license in Canada to be used or sold, which is unique, I would say.
How do they get through that loophole-ish? Would you call it a loophole, or because they're not being used in the operating room and they're just used for sterilization, that's how they get by without having to have a license? Does that question make any sense?
It makes sense, yeah. I don't know if I could speak to that per se, because as a distribution company, Trudell, we ensure that all of our stuff is properly licensed and regulation, policies and procedures, and everything's followed. And when it came to the rigid sterilization containers, they did not need to be licensed, and that's a decision and communication that came from Health Canada. So, I can't speak much more to it.
So we have to have Health Canada on here so they can explain it more.
Yeah, and it's good to hear the difference. You know what I mean? I know Stacey and I are writing an article with Lisa McCowan and Tiffany Church, and we're doing the similarities and differences between the CSA standard and the ST 79 and some of the other American AAMI standards too, right? So obviously there's differentiation. There is a border, you know what I mean? But as we know, pathogens have no border, you know what I mean? And no tariffs either, you know what I mean? So they can walk freely back and forth. So yeah, it's good to know a little bit about both sets of standards, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I think, right now it really just shows where people working, your MDR staff and those people who are experts in the field, really shows kind of where your expertise comes in terms of, of making, proper evaluation, looking and assessing the IFUs and those sorts of things with the products you're using, especially when it comes to sterilization containers, in Canada.
Mm-hmm. That kind of follows into our next question too, then, Derek. So as a medical field professional, what is your professional opinion on the pod?
Yeah, no, great question. I thought about, thinking about this one a little bit. It's definitely an interesting concept. It's, I guess the easiest way to describe it would be really just an extra large or very big rigid sterilization container that you're able to fit a whole bunch of open sets into, that then closes and you're able to sterilize that, has a whole unit in your sterilizer. Definitely an interesting concept. And, I know there's research around its ability to decrease cost, increase turnover, allow for those extra surgeries to happen. So when it comes to use in facilities in Canada, I think it really comes down to individual facilities. Are you set up to use them? How does that integration look? How, does it abide by your infection prevention control procedures? So there's definitely a lot of considerations. Also, when I looked at them, there's some things that I see about them that I just have, it makes me have some questions about them in terms of, what happens if you have a wet set. Now, everything you need for the surgery isn't good. Or, what if one of your indicators isn't showing what you need it to show when you open that up? Is it the whole thing needs to be reprocessed? Is it the particular portion? So you really, when I think about it, you're placing all your eggs in one basket. But I know there is positives to it as well. So it's really, I think, something that you have to sit down and really evaluate the pros and cons to it and see if it's something that works for your specific facility. Maybe it only works for certain specialties, certain cases, things like that, right? Because I also think about pick lists, right? I know every surgeon has a different pick list than every procedure does, right? So it's definitely something to think about.
I don't have any experience working with the pod, but I've seen, pictures and read articles on it and stuff like that. So from my understanding, there's less containers used and less blue wrap.
Well, it's one big container.
So it's all in there, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
every single thing for that one surgery.
Yeah, so it's greener. It's better for the environment as well. That's a good point for it as well, right? So it is going for it.
I'm not 100% sure. Is there anywhere in Canada yet that uses it?
I'm not sure.
I couldn't say for sure. At the moment, it's not something that Trudell has, or through, our major vendor partner, Aesculap, who does our sterilization, who we sell rigid sterilization containers from. Aesculap doesn't have one at this time. So I can't say. In my travels, I haven't seen one yet.
I don't think, I don't want to speak for Canada, but I don't think we've adopted it into our standards just yet, because we're still trying to I think it's a very gray area still. Only because, like we had just talked about, what if they crack that open and there's one OBS in there and there's one indicator that is spoiled?
Maybe we can have right there. Maybe we can have the designer on. I think his name's Roger.
I know him personally.
Yeah,
I know him.
So
yes.
Maybe we can have him
on.
So
you know what? He's going to be a guest. He's good. You know what? We're going to have him on this season.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And Derek, like we were saying before we started recording, that's how, we're just building relationships, man, like lasting and impactful relationships. Stacey and I, we don't even use the word networking. It's just so cold, and we're building another episode just off of this conversation, off of this episode. So that's awesome, right? That's awesome.
No, I think it would definitely be a great idea to get someone like that on. It's something new in the industry. I think, having those conversations is important to really learn about it. And especially if you can get it right from the source in terms of someone who helped develop it would be fantastic, right? So.
And Derek, we always want to talk about preventative maintenance of our storage containers. Kind of leads into this one too a little bit. What are some key red flag indicators for our listeners that they can watch out for, and to help prolong the longevity and maintain the high quality assurance of the products that we have on hand?
Yeah, no, great question. It's something that I spend a lot of time working with my sites on, is the preventative maintenance and, your daily checks of your rigid sterilization containers. Every time they come through the washer, before you put your sets in, here's the checks that should be done. And I think it's really looking at protecting the investment and, also ensuring that they're going to work properly to keep your sets sterile. At the end of the day, it's, we're looking at patient safety, right? So by doing your preventative maintenance with your containers is going to ensure that they function and work properly. What the IFU says is going to happen, right, in terms of sterility guarantees and those sorts of things, shelf life, all those sorts of things, right? So when I go through the container, some of the red flags that I look for, or I tell the staff that I'm working with to look for, are things such as warping or dents in the container, especially near the top by the lid, or the lid itself. That's just going to make it really hard for that container to make a really good seal. Any things like rust or corrosion of the metal.
There could be crust too.
There could be crust too, but rust or corrosion of of any of the metals. Majority of the containers on the market are made of aluminum, but they'll still have some stainless steel parts on them. Damaged or worn out gaskets is really important. So taking a look at that gasket underneath the lid and checking to make sure the integrity of it's good. There's no cuts or any kind of chunks taken out of it. And also just giving it a little bit of like a squish to make sure it's still pliable and still has that kind of elasticity to it, because that's what's really going to mold around the container bottom and create that seal that you need to prevent anything from getting in there. And then, things like missing or malfunctioning latches, loose filter retention plate pins, things like that.
It's early, Derek. It's okay.
Yeah, are all things that, I look for, or I tell staff to look for when they're doing their preventative maintenance and checks. When it comes to preventative maintenance, there's not a lot on a container, but there's a couple moving parts. So if you look at those latches, if they feel sticky or they're making squeaking or whatever, really a lot of times all it needs is a simple drop of your sterilizable lubricant. Just work that in there and they'll be working good again. A lot of times it doesn't need to be sent out to get fixed or anything like that. That's all it is. Sometimes it does. Sometimes they're bent. Sometimes they've been worn out. Containers can be fixed just like any other instrument. So that's another thing too, right? Is the cost to fix is usually always lower than the cost to replace.
And Trudell Healthcare has a really good program too with repairs, correct?
We do, yeah. Yeah, so we have a repair facility right in London, Ontario, with some really experienced repair technicians who work on our stuff. We've had lots of training, and done training down in Aesculap. So we are an approved OEM repair for those containers. But we also have what's called a blue box program. So what that offers you is loaner lids to use while you send out your lids for repair. So that way you're not down containers, down sets, because that's usually the concern is you send your lids out for repair. Well, what am I doing now with these sets that don't have lids, right?
It goes to the graveyard for a month.
Exactly, right? So we started up this blue box program just over a year ago, I think. Done it with a couple of sites in my territory, and they really liked it and they've used it. So definitely it's, I think it's something that hopefully you guys at the site level will find valuable.
And I think that's the program I was referring to, because I knew there was something that you guys have had, because at my facility, we just did a big inventory purchase in the last couple of years. And we were introduced to that program because I'm less than an hour away from London. So, yeah. And then I'll name drop, but Steve Morte is our rep. So he was telling us about this program. And I'm like, that's actually really good, because you're right. Because if something goes out for repair, that pan, which means that set, is out of commission until the lid, let's say, or the bottom comes back. And that's less equipment that we now have on our shelves to supply our surgeons to do surgeries on our patients. So that's a great program you guys have. And I'm sure other companies have very similar ones as well. So, but we're going to spotlight Aesculap today.
No worries. Yeah. It's great to hear that, you are finding value in that. I know we try and work with our sites and our, with you guys or, whoever we're dealing with to try and obviously make sure we're offering services that line up with what you're looking for. So, I guess just in that sense too, right? I know myself and everyone else, we're always open to suggestions in terms of whatever works. I know there's other companies who have different options and different services that they offer when it comes to instrument repair, container repair as well.
Yep. As well, we just got a new pick room, which will kind of fall into storage here in a little bit. I can't remember what company did our pick room, forgive me, but they build their shelving units to fit Aesculap pans. So we were told that right from the get-go. They're like, oh, you have Aesculap. We still have a couple other companies. We have Genesis with us, a few of them. But their side shelvings, like the stackables, are all fit to do Aesculap pans. I thought that was pretty neat. I did share that with your company after. I was like, just to let you know.
Sounds like you guys got it going on, Stace.
It's you know what, you hit 15 years, 20 years into a department and everything has to be replaced.
Yeah.
That's how it works. So we're kind of at that right now where everything, and then if we ask for anything in the next 5 years, they're going to be like, no, we spent way too much money on you. Like, nope. Nope.
You got it all.
Yeah. But Derek, so as a vendor rep, you matter to us just as much as we matter to you. So I'm going to say, as a technician, we appreciate your work just as much as you appreciate ours. Because we're all working together to maintain the greater good, what is something an MDR team can do to help make your role at Trudell more productive?
I think the biggest thing with this is really open communication back and forth each way, right? You know, I obviously try and keep open communication channels with my customers in terms of, you know, everything from, you know, order placement to back orders, you know, anything of that such, right? So if there's going to be
criticism,
yeah, all that stuff, right? But, you know, I think anything that you're able to share in terms of feedback, challenges, gaps in training, any of that stuff is really super important in helping us ensure that the technicians and the staff and everyone feel comfortable working with the products that we represent for you, right? I know you guys have lots, right? A lot of different vendors, a lot of different products, depending on the hospitals you work at. You can have a lot of different specialties. So there's a lot of things, and, you know, you're expected to know a lot in terms of, you know, basically the idea is, you know, the IFU for every single instrument that comes through there in terms of, you know, what it looks like on decontam to what it looks like, you know, for assembly. Can it be sterilized, assembled, or disassembled? There's just so much that you need to know, right? So I think that's where we can come in terms of providing a lot of that knowledge and education or resources to be able to help along with that. But sometimes we all, you know, we love to hear from you guys in terms of what are you looking for out of your vendor partners. So I don't know if I could throw a question back to you in terms of what are some of the things that you've noticed in your years in the industry in terms of what makes a good partner or vendor rep for you?
I think just always being available to answer questions about products is key. You have vendors who are not present. You see them maybe once, twice a year, if that. They'll walk through, you'll be like, who's that? And they're like, oh, that's so-and-so from whatever company. But I'm going to say, Barry, do you agree with me? Just having a vendor rep there who to answer questions, also educate us on the products as well. Nothing's worse than dropping product off and being like, okay, well, is it sterile? Is it steam? Like, how do I do this?
100%
I know our rep, again, has always been on site when we got new products. When we went through our pans and got all new pans, that was when Steve was actually still down in southwestern Ontario. He was with us for 2 weeks straight, building these pans, answering questions. So I would just say availability when we need you, if that makes sense. Both ways, right? Both ways.
Yeah, Stace, that's 100%. You know, we've talked about this numerous times. We both have been blessed with some really good vendor reps. Like Stace was saying, present, definitely, and communication, vital.
And listening to us,
yes.
Listening to our feedback and taking it into accountability. Because as a technician, we're the ones working with this product every day.
The end users,
so take it back to the builders and be like, here's the feedback I've received. Can you tweak it? Because these are the ones that are saying, they're the ones giving us all the feedback we need.
Yeah. And we've got some vendors that are that on the ball and that fantastic that, you know, like I could be training somebody and a month later, the same vendor come in and say, oh, hi, Barry. Oh, hi, Rob. You know what I mean? Like they actually remember that name. They make that connection with team members. And like Stace said, it's just, it's a two-way street. It's how we can both make each other better to ensure the patient's safety, you know?
Names are just brownie points, though, Derek, so don't get stressed out, okay?
Yeah, no, it's...
Be like, oh my God, I got to remember all this, let alone everyone's names? No.
So we got to have to start to make like a Rolodex or something.
Yeah. Some vendors are that good, though, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Derek's one of them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We'll roll into our last one here, Derek. So one of the most important factors in sterilization, obviously, is maintaining sterility and preventing infection in patients, which we kind of dabbled into in some of the previous questions. So a key factor in maintaining sterility is the way the instrumentation is stored and transported. Are you able to go a little more into detail the process and steps the manufacturers at Trudell take to ensure minimal risk of contamination during the sterilization process and after?
Yeah. So, I think the big thing here again, right, is kind of, I think, looping back to some of our previous conversation in terms of licensing and compliance and different things like that, right? So within Canada, we don't have the licensing, but ensuring what you're using for sterilization has the proper approvals in terms of it meets CSA standards, it meets ISO, any of the requirements there. I think those are all super important, in terms of the preventative maintenance, especially when it comes to containers, is super important, right? I think the stated lifespan in the IFU for a rigid sterilization container, at least Aesculap, is 10 years. That's a long time for something to be.
That is a long time to be banged around.
Exactly, right? Like, you know what can happen to some of these containers as they move around the hospital, right? So the preventative maintenance portion is very important, right? That's where you're going to do your checks and, going through it and getting really proficient at it. You can do these checks really quickly in under a minute, usually 30 seconds, just some quick checks just to make sure everything is looking and functioning well is going to ensure that when it goes through sterilization and comes out, what's in there is going to stay sterile, right? I think there's definitely huge benefits to rigid sterilization containers, say when you're looking at them compared to blue wrap, right? You're looking at the environmental benefits. You're looking at the benefits in terms of less rips, tears, holes in your wrap. So there's lots of benefits to it, but with that also comes the capital kind of portion to it in terms of managing that asset, just like a surgical instrument, right? You're testing it for, if it's a pair of scissors, you're doing your sharpness testing. If it's a laparoscopic instrument that's insulated, you're doing your conductivity testing. Well, those same kind of things need to happen with a sterile container, just to ensure that you're going to get the value out of it for the lifespan that you should see. So I think those are all super big things. And then, I think just to kind of build on that a bit, looking at maybe some of the new stuff that's coming down the pipeline. I know we discussed pods, but Aesculap recently released a new series of Icon container. So I'm not sure if you've been able to see them yet or not. If you haven't, reach out to your Trudell rep and have them bring in a demo. We
can share it on the Beyond Clean page too on LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. There's some benefits to it in terms of it, how the container seals, how it can deal with wet sets, how that top edge is sterile when they open it in the OR, which is really big. So there's, in terms of what we're doing now to ensure sterility prevention of infection, but also some of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline. And that comes from, like we talked about, or like you talked about before, Stacey, that feedback that you give us, right? We ensure that flows back to Aesculap and they hear those things. So, yeah.
And Derek, you mentioned the magic word earlier in your response to that question, compliance, for the storage of the containers and stuff like that. Yeah, you know what I mean? You were doing our temperature and humidity checks. We're making sure it's certain distance off the floor, certain distance off the wall, certain distance from the ceiling. You know what I mean? And if people aren't enforcing that or complying with the standard, it's all for naught. You know what I mean? So it was great that you actually said the word compliance, because that's a huge follow-up in our industry. We got to do what we're supposed to do, right? So awesome to hear that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I think, I know it's been mentioned before on this show and mentioned in other shows, but, I know you guys are you are the heart of the hospital, and a lot of things can't run. And, when it comes to patient safety, right, it's super important, the jobs that you do. So, obviously really, really appreciate what you guys do coming from a vendor rep, but also as a patient, knowing that, when I go into these hospitals, that I'm going to be receiving the best possible treatment from the surgeons and the staff who I see when I go in, but I also know, hey, there's people in the basement. I know that's where you normally are. Unfortunately, there's not many places you get windows. There's one MDR I walked into that had windows and is like kind of looked. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy.
And I mentioned, Stace, we're actually on the top floor, so we actually have the sunrise and the sunsets. We got the windows, right? So we are pretty blessed that way. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it goes both ways, Derek. That's for sure. We appreciate everything that you do for us as well. And to all of our listeners out there, Trudell, Aesculap are very accommodating when your staff needs education, and reach out to your reps and they will come to you and do a refresher, because it is, what is it? It is March right now. This will be released later on. So I think it's fall. We usually do our CE. So get a hold of your Trudell rep. And Derek, we want to thank you so much for joining us today on season 2. You will be our first guest.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insightful information.
No, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. Really, really appreciate it, and was, super excited to have the opportunity to come on and chat with both of you. It's been great.
Hopefully we'll see you in June. Conversation, Barry?
It was great. It was fantastic, right?
And we made it to season 2.
Yes, super excited for that. Derek was a great guest.
Yeah.
I learned quite a bit too about the MDAL. I wasn't aware that even existed. So I mean, we've had conversations before during the episodes. It's like we're both learning different things. So that's awesome for us. And I don't think a whole lot of other people realize that that's out there either. So it's great to have that resource available to us. So
and it's right on the Government of Canada website too. I was introduced to that a couple years ago, I think, just right after COVID. So what did you think of season 1? It was good. All I learned is that I need to stop saying amazing. And I think, what was the other one? Awesome? Yeah. And absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm not going to do any of that in season 2.
Just rotate them through, right?
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, Stacey, stop.
Yeah. It's good, though. We can be our own worst critics, too. I've had a couple little things, too, that I've kind of circled on my not-to-do list.
Feedback, though, too. It was great. And we look forward to delivering all of Season 2 and Season 3 and years to come to all of our clean freaks out there. Thanks for joining us for our very first episode of Season 2.
Buckle up.
Keep fighting dirty.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Clean Canada, your source for MDR content, education, and inspiration. If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd love to hear from you on the BCCA LinkedIn or Facebook page, or anywhere podcasts are heard. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite app. And until we talk again, keep fighting dirty.